So.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah, yeah. We're actually looking for a somebody to edit that column. So, you know, if that's something you might be interested in,
Yes.
you keep us informed, right?
Okay. Should I email you, or who should I email?
Yeah. You can the CATESOL Journal at Gmail. Here, I'll put it. It's on the slides, but
okay, great. Thanks.
Good. Yeah, Yi Lu. Thank you for that question about how we're not currently. Oh, you're working on your dissertation. Okay, and Bida, you were the one that asked about what we're up to these days. I do want to let you know that yes, we are currently working on a couple of special issues of the journal while we are moving from one platform to another, and building the back end of the platform is taking a bit of time. So, but we are going to be receiving manuscripts starting in probably the beginning of 2023. But I'm going to make a special exception for anyone who comes today if they wanted to talk to me about their anything that they're working on. I'd be happy to give them a little bit of help with that even beforehand.
Okay. Wonderful, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so how do we look here? Do you think you want to get started?
Yeah, let's get started.
Yeah, so 1/3 of our group is here. We're going to get started. So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sedique Popal. I'm a professor of applied linguistics at the University of San Francisco, and also the co-chair of the college and university level at the CATESOL Board of Directors. My very esteemed colleague here is Dr. Emmy. She is the professor of linguistics and education at the University of Southern California. In Northern California, we call it the University of Dr. Krashen, but that's a different story. And she's also the chair of the college university level at the CATESOL Board of Directors. Dr. Min and I planned this pre-conference event in order to be inclusive, because not everybody could come to the main event in Pasadena, California. We wanted to make sure that everybody benefits, those that they could come to the main event and those that they cannot make it there, so they can benefit from CATESOL and what CATESOL offers. And so I'd like to welcome you, and then I'd like to also introduce our speaker, Professor Margi Wald. She's the managing editor of CATESOL Journal. Professor Wald is also a lecturer for college writing program at UC Berkeley, and she's the director of the Summer English Language Studies at UC Berkeley. On behalf of the college university level and CATESOL Board of Directors, I would like to thank Professor Wald for accepting our invitation to appear at this pre-conference event and to share her expertise and experiences with us. So please join me in welcoming Professor Wald.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a very, very generous and nice introduction there. I'm just going to go ahead and share some slides. And Emmy, if you would, could you recopy that slide link for everyone? Right. And just to get us started, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll and give everyone a second to answer the poll. So in deciding on a journal for your submission, so if the CATESOL Journal or another, right? And drafting your manuscript, which of these strategies do you think is most important? We'll give everyone just another second and see if anyone else wants to participate.
The poll went away. Oh, here it is.
It went away.
It went away, and now it's the results.
That's okay. That's all right, because it's kind of a trick question. Okay. Of course, all of these things are very important, but the one that people tend not to do, that is really, really important is to read through several issues of the journal. Those of us on the editorial team cannot say enough about the importance. Yes, it's important to read the mission of the journal if you're completely unprepared or completely unfamiliar. And if you are, of course, you want to take a look at the submission guidelines, but it's going to be really, really important to look through several issues of the journal. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of these slides that I put together. Here's the plan for today. I'll do a little bit of a talk just to give you some background and tips, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, if that's all right with everybody. But I'm pretty informal, as if you haven't already figured that out. So anytime there are questions during the talk, I don't mind being quote unquote interrupted. That's fine. Just raise your hand or put a question in the chat. And I think Emmy and Sedique are my esteemed colleagues are following along and helping out with that. So good. Let me go ahead and right. So that was just the chat question. That was the poll. So here's our overview for today. I'm going to talk a little bit about just choosing a journal in general for your manuscript. We'll then talk about the review and revision process, characteristics of the CATESOL Journal specifically, and CATESOL Journal articles and book reviews. So choosing a venue. So this is where these three things are very, very important. And as I said, most people will do these two things. And we've tried at the CATESOL Journal, because we are a journal for teachers and not necessarily a research, we're a pedagogical journal and not a research journal. We've tried to make our submission guidelines, make that clear. And we've tried to talk a little bit about how to make that happen. But what I have found is the best strategy for figuring out what the right journal is for your piece is to read those journals, right? By looking at the specific articles that get accepted and how they are formatted and what they focus in on and what gets privileged, right, in the write-up is kind of your most important strategy. And never feel like it's fine to contact the editor of a journal, especially a mentoring journal like the CATESOL Journal, but even others, right? If you have an idea, we are in the business of talking to you about whether the journal that we edit is appropriate for your piece and whether your piece is appropriate for that journal and what you would want to do to make it most appropriate for the journal. So don't feel uncomfortable about contacting the editors. I know now all these editors around the world are going, are you kidding me? Okay, but no, it really is true, right? A couple of other just background pieces of information for those of you who may be new to publishing, right? Multiple submissions are forbidden. So once you've submitted your manuscript to a particular journal, please don't submit it anywhere else. That's considered very, very bad form. Okay, if you've never published a piece before and you've got a piece that's about informally collected data, then you probably don't want to send it to the CATESOL Journal or the CATESOL Quarterly. So don't overshoot or undershoot in your choice of journals, right? If it's a well-researched study, you could submit it to a highly competitive journal and follow those guidelines very, 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 very carefully. Okay. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the review process. And this is the review process in general, but it's also more specifically for the CATESOL Journal, given the type of journal that we are. A mentoring journal is designed to work with novice writers as well as experienced writers. We are happy to work through the process with you. We encourage you to submit your pieces and get feedback from our volunteer, but very interested and engaged reviewers who want to help people get prepared for, helping people ready their manuscript for publication. So here's what happens. Manuscript arrives, right? Editor decides, hey, should I send this out for review? So that's the first question. And sometimes this is called a desk review. And sometimes the editors will just send it back at that point and say, hey, no. And at the CATESOL Journal, we never really say no. We say, hey, your manuscript doesn't quite fit the mission or topic. Here's what you could do to make that happen. Or, you know, it's really not contributing anything new to the field. And that's a really hard one for people to take, especially graduate students, because you've all just taken some really cool class and you've learned all about motivation and ESL. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's so exciting. It's so cool. And I've written this seminar paper and I'm going to submit it to the journal. But here's the deal. The majority of the people who are reading the journal either have an MA already or are in your position as well. So they kind of know that. So you've got to do something, right, with that information in order to turn it into a piece. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. Content is underdeveloped or weak, but also the journal, a mentoring journal will tell you how to improve that. Other journals may tell you what's wrong, whereas we try to give you more constructive criticism. Grammar and style problems make the manuscript difficult to read, or it doesn't follow the required criteria. But again, at the CATESOL Journal, very infrequently do we reject a manuscript outright, unless it is about something not having anything to do with California or of any interest to California teachers and administrators. So then the manuscript goes to the reviewers. The reviewers have the expertise in the topic. And at most journals, this is what you get. You get an accept. You get an accept with minor revisions, revise and resubmit, or reject. And hopefully the reviewers provide revision suggestions. The majority of people who submit to any journal are going to get one of these two in the middle here, accept with minor revisions or revise and resubmit, right? But sometimes you will get a reject outright from other journals, right? So be prepared for that. What's great is there's always a journal that's willing to work with you and get your piece published. If you're willing to put in the time to make revisions, then most journals, especially mentoring journals like the CATESOL Journal, are willing to work through that with you. Okay, so, but this is really important. If you get a revise and resubmit, please address all the reviewer feedback, right? You may or may not agree with all of the feedback. That's okay, but you want to make sure that you somehow respond to all the feedback. And we recommend that you include a cover letter addressing each revision suggestion and how you have responded to it, right? And please be aware that reviewers may give you conflicting feedback. I was just one of those reviewers on a piece for the Journal of Second Language Writing. I come from one background and the other reviewer came from another background. And so I was picking on certain things and the other reviewer was kind of focusing on other types of issues in the manuscript. So it's also okay in a situation like that if you're kind of stuck to talk to the editor about which direction you should take, right? One thing to also remember is to try to resubmit as promptly as you can, because the reviewers and board members change, and so your original reviewers may kind of disappear off the board. The CATESOL Journal, however, we sometimes will work with people over several months or even a year in order to ready the piece for publication. Okay, so here's an example of a cover letter, just so you can see what I'm talking about, right? Here are the suggestions that were in the feedback from the reviewers. And here is a response. So on page 2, I framed my study within sociocultural theory, or after my findings, I included a section, or I updated all my sources, I proofread, right? And sometimes people even put the page numbers here to really help the reviewers see what's going on, right? And I've made these slides available to you, and I think Emmy put the slides, the link to the slides in the chat. So let me double check and make sure. Maybe not. Let me go ahead and get the slide link for you, because I'm going to kind of go through this pretty quickly because you'll have it at your disposal there. I put it back in the chat. Right? So here's an example of a cover letter, right? And then right? Let's talk more specifically about the journal. But let me just pause here for a second. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Because I am like slamming through this because I really wanted this to be more of a Q&A, but I always feel that it's important. Gina seems to have a question. Yes, Gina.
Yes, ma'am. Could you do me a favor and tell me what you would consider informally collected data? Like what does that look like exactly when you say informally?
Informally collected data would be like classroom data that you've collected, but maybe through a reflective teaching project, not something that has been, not something that has been coded by various raters and other things, but just more informal kinds of projects that you're doing. We collect, for example, the CATESOL Journal, if you want to do a reflective writing piece or an action research project that may not, there are ways that you can write up action research, and there are ways in which you need to design action research to have it fall under the kind of rigorous action research framework. But we also will publish a number of pieces where maybe you're getting more informal feedback from students in your class about a task that they did, right? And that's great, and that's great even sometimes for the CATESOL Journal, but for something like the quarterly, they're looking for very rigorous studies being done. The CATESOL Journal, we will look at all sorts of studies, all sorts of activities for the classroom, all sorts of program changes that you've made, or maybe you did a survey of students to see what their thoughts were on the program, but you didn't necessarily do IRB, or you didn't necessarily make sure that somebody vetted that survey before you did it. You were just trying to get a little bit of feedback for your program, right? We're okay with that, but a journal like CATESOL Quarterly is going to be a little bit more of a stickler about making sure that everything has been vetted. Okay, I don't know if that answers your question enough, but
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
good. So, and yes, I know, I just realized this, Marcia, thank you. I'm sorry that I used an old CATESOL Journal frame, and I forgot to update the CATESOL logo. So all of you watching this, the logo's wrong. I will update it when we share the slides, but I can't change it on the recording. So things to remember about any other questions, or I should ask if anyone else has any questions before I just plow through. Okay. Janice asks is a study of a school's accreditation process a realistic research topic? Oh yes, that's very, very good. I think that's the kind of information, you've asked the question at the perfect time as we get into our readership. Think about what is it that that the readers of the journal are going to be interested in. So the readers of the journal are, of course, we have a graduate student population, but we have teachers, teacher trainers, and teacher scholars. We have administrators and program admin, et cetera. So all of these types of studies, it's very hard to get certain types of things published in traditional journals. That's changing a little bit, but all of we as teachers and teacher trainers and teacher scholars, we have a wealth of knowledge from our classrooms, from our programs, and we should share that information with a larger audience than just our programs. And it's hard to do that. And so the CATESOL Journal is designed to try to help be a venue for sharing of that kind of information. And so we will work with writers who are working on, perhaps, I hate the marked form of non-standard, but very different types of articles than just your standard introduction, method, results discussion. But if you have a study that has great pedagogical and program implications, then that's something the journal's really looking for, right? Okay, so we're looking for innovative pedagogical practices, research findings that inform teaching and teacher training. And this is an important one that a lot of journals don't necessarily do as much, which is insights that will help us rethink, add to, or change the way we teach or the way we train teachers. And those are the things that don't always get a lot of coverage in journals. So that said, we are a rigorous peer-reviewed academic journal. So we do blind reviews. We do count if some of you are working on merit reviews and other things. We aren't an A1 research journal, but it will count as a peer-reviewed academic article. But as I said before, we're also a mentoring journal, and so we support the development of new scholars. So if it's appropriate for our readership, our motto is kind of, we'll stick with it as long as you will, which means that, we may ask you to do several rounds of revision. But if you do that, and we're doing that not because we're mean, but because we have very specific needs for our very specific audience, and we want to help you get your piece to the point where it's appropriate for that audience. I'm looking here in the chat. Yi Lu asks, what does the word account for the journal? Do you mean the word count? Yi?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll get to that. It's like manuscript pages. We have a couple, we take anything from like 10 pages to about 25 pages, maybe 30 with some, with a lot of appendices and things like that, because the more cool stuff from your classroom or your study or wherever that you share with the teachers, the better. So sometimes it gets on the long side. But I'm going to talk to you, when we talk about articles, I want to talk to you about what to focus on, right? And how to privilege certain information, right? So as I noted earlier, we publish twice a year. We are kind of working on some special issues right now. We'll begin accepting new manuscripts in 2023. We don't really have a specific deadline. We publish when we're good to go, when we have enough articles, because some articles are ready right away, some have multiple revisions, right? We can send an acceptance letter even if we can't necessarily publish something for a couple of months, so that you can have that for any kind of merit review, right? And as I said, for those of you who are here today, if you have articles and you want to talk to somebody about something before 2023, if you send a note to the CATESOL Journal email, which I'll share at the end, just say that you came to this workshop, and I will make sure that I respond to that and give you some feedback. Okay. Right. And let's see, Tamara says something conducted for them. Yes. Tamara, I have a student who put together a weekend college conference for a couple hundred traditionally underserved high school students and conducted a program evaluation and is following up on the impact. Good venues. I think that the journal would be a great venue for that, right? I don't know, depending on how rigorous that program evaluation was and how rigorous the follow-up is, you might be able to publish it somewhere else, but I think for now, I would definitely suggest that you send it to us. I think it would be great, right? I don't know. I think it's a population that is underserved in the journals as well, and so that's our goal, is to try to work with and publish information like that. Okay, let me just finish with the articles, and then I'll turn it over to all of you. So as is probably clear from who we are as CATESOL, that we focus on issues relevant to educational settings in California. That doesn't mean we won't publish something from another setting. We often do, but we do ask that authors make sure that they are thinking about how this is relevant to educational settings in California. If somebody's talking about programs that really don't exist in California, they can make, if it's something where they're trying to make a call for that, that's fine. But if it's something where they're going to talk about how they do a lot of things under something that doesn't exist in California, then, or if it's only second language, only an EFL setting, and it's talking about something having to do with the educational ministry in that country, it's obviously not going to have that much import for California, unless we have a huge population from that country, and the data will be interesting for us to understand what our students bring into our classrooms. Again, you can discuss theory, research, pedagogy, or educational policy programming, right? We contribute, you need to make sure that it contributes to the existing scholarly conversations in the fields, and make sure that you talk about how readers can adapt whatever it is that you're talking about to their own educational setting, right? Because we are a pedagogical journal. Article length, as asked, generally, again, 10 to 25 pages, double spaced. We're still in the double spaced world. I suppose we should change this now to word counts, since everybody's doing stuff online, but submissions shouldn't exceed 30 pages. We do ask still that you give us a document that's double spaced, only because it's easier for our reviewers to read. But the most important thing is the quality and the focus, that we will ignore length concerns, especially because we're all online now, if the quality and focus of the article is appropriate. So again, this is where I remind us of our poll, right? As you're readying your piece, read the mission, read the submission guidelines, read through several issues. And again, read through several issues of the journal, right? Okay, I've said it. I promised Robert Coles, one of our editors, that I would say that at least 6 times during this workshop. So I think I've done 5, so I'm good. All right. Here are just a couple of tips, right? For the CATESOL Journal itself, because we are a tad different from a lot of other journals, especially research-oriented journals. We are a pedagogical journal. So while we do publish research, qualitative and quantitative, they have to go beyond merely discussing these results, right? The articles have to contain a substantial section discussing implications, how readers can apply findings to their teaching practice. We are not talking just to other researchers. We are talking to teachers. We are talking to teacher trainers, okay? This is super important. Those of you who are doing research studies as graduate students, I know that you're going to spend a whole lot of time on your methods, right? Because that's like really important in your graduate program. But we've got a different readership here. And so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to like mess with some of so I'm going to pull out the foundation from under you on a few of these topics, right? We publish theory-based articles as well, but again, they have to go beyond merely presenting. They have to contain a section of how readers can apply your theoretical insights to their teaching. And, oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to go back. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but I'll talk to you in just a second about how you can change up the way in which you're writing these research articles to shift the focus for our readership. Talk about that in just a second. But first, I just wanted to give you a minute to look at these. These are just some titles from some current journal submissions and things that we've published. And just take a minute, and you can either raise your hand or you can write in the chat. What do you notice about these titles in terms of our readership? What do you notice about these? You can write in the chat or you can raise your hand. See, I give the quiz and everyone's quiet. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Yes, pertinent to California teachers, very practical. Yes. Anything else? Strong pedagogical implications. Yes. Good. Okay. Yeah. Okay, yes, it is true. Only one talks about the level. I think the last one does too, higher education. Yeah, so there's some teacher training things. So I wanted to show you that there is a variety, right? We've got adult schools. Notice that the studies are very much based on things that teachers will want to know, right? In fact, what teachers want and need to know was the title of ours, right? And this was international students in college level classrooms and how their writing instructors were perceiving their work with them, right? But yeah, the whole idea is to really get you to think about how you need to reframe potentially research that you're doing for if you'd like to publish it in a pedagogical journal. Okay, so adapting papers, right? Here's a question that might be of interest to all of you. Can I submit my graduate seminar paper? Sure. However, please do not submit it as is, right? Your seminar paper has a different goal. It's to summarize, synthesize, and display knowledge, right? Yeah, thank you, RG Wakeland, for what's going on in classrooms now, right? Good, right? So if you want to take your seminar paper, as I said, we all have learned a lot about motivation. So it's like, how do you want to take us one step farther? How can you provide us a new way of approaching teaching or curriculum or teacher development? How can we integrate this into our practice? And that's exactly what you're going to get back from somebody if you turn in your seminar paper. We just have an automatic kind of email turnaround that just says, hey, this is really interesting, however, right? What about your lesson plans? We welcome them for innovative practices. They have to go on beyond simply describing what you do in your own classroom. If you want to write up what you do in your own classroom, that's great for the newsletter. That's great for the blog. CATESOL has both of those. But for the journal, you need to argue for an innovative practice, grounding it in current research and theory. Can I submit a dissertation chapter? Yes, however, right? Again, you need to reframe the research methods, the literature review, and the findings to a scope appropriate for a more general audience than your committee, right? So here's some things to think about for those of you who have research articles that you'd like to submit, right? Use the introduction to frame the issue. And remember that we have a wide readership. Provide a brief literature review, maybe as short as 3 to 4 paragraphs. I know you're all clutching your chests right there, but it's really just, unless the piece really is a synthesis of literature to make an argument, we really want you to get to the study pretty quickly. So brief methods section, to get to the results pretty quickly. Most of the article is going to be findings, discussion, and implications. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be well designed, but the way that you write it up for our audience is a little bit different from how you'd write it up for your graduate program or for a research journal. So articles containing statistical analysis, remember, we are not statisticians, and there's a lot of research to show that teachers just pass right over all that, right? So design the piece in a way that if I'm a stat person, I can go and check, and our reviewers can go and check the work that you're doing, but foreground the findings. Put a lot of the charts and graphs and things, maybe those go in appendices, right? Look at our journal, and actually on the tips page that we have on our website, I actually linked to a couple of articles that show you how that's done so that you're focusing on results, and your results aren't a percentage with a p-value. It's like students thought this, students felt that, teachers did that, teachers didn't like this, right? That's really what you're focusing in on. You're using the numbers perhaps to support what you're saying, but we don't want to read numbers as results. We want to read implications as results. Okay, and just one more set of slides here, quick. If you're writing a review, right, that's a great way to get your feet wet. right? And to share your expertise. It's a really good idea to have taught with a textbook, by the way, before you review it, not just read through the textbook. And there's some information about length here, right? Recently published material. And then here's the structure of the review. And I'm going to leave this for all of you in the slides so that you can have this at your disposal. It doesn't necessarily have to be in exactly this order, but the nice thing about a book review, if you've not written anything before, there is a pretty clear genre and you can follow it. And it's nice, right? And we'll give you, again, we'll give you feedback on your reviews. Right? And choosing materials, making sure that you consider what makes them worthy of review. Okay. And think about our readership. Okay. And this is just some information, again, to look through back issues, etc. Right? So again, I slammed through these because I know you're going to have a copy of them and you can use them whenever you want. Here's our contact information. And again, if you get started on something and you want some feedback on it, feel free to write to that email and say that you attended this and I can give you some feedback. Even if we're not submitting manuscripts yet, you can always write and just ask us, hey, am I on the right track here? Okay, so boom, that was my ever so fast. Hope you didn't want to breathe. Hi, Robin. I see some Robins here. Down and dirty look at how to publish in the CATESOL Journal. And thank you for that heart. And now it's up, it's open. I'm happy to take any questions that you have in the chat or just raise your hand. Right? If you have a project that you're working on, you have a burning question, thank you, Gina, whatever it is, right? Here's where the Zoom thing happens. Look at all those rectangles. Who wants to talk?
Thank you, Margie. If you have any questions, we have a hand raised.
A hand up.
From go ahead.
Thank you so much, Margie. This was so helpful and so encouraging. Thank you for that very encouraging tone that you have. I worked on with my co-author. We have a manuscript that we're waiting for CATESOL to open up again so we can submit it.
Okay.
Speaking of the readership, I'm just concerned that the readership may be a little too narrow for this manuscript because we are addressing the implications of AB 705 and how the placement tests are no longer allowed in community colleges for English. And as a result, a lot of community colleges are now trying to propose and offer a college composition level class for multilingual students. Yes. So now my college, Santa Rosa Junior College, was the very first college in California that offered this class. And now it's been 3 years that we're offering this class. And my co-author and I are writing about that. Mm-hmm. The pedagogy or the approach that we're using in that class, and it's so different from essay writing. It's a genre analysis.
Oh, so good.
Because it sounds good.
Yeah,
but it's only. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I cut you off. I didn't mean to. Go ahead.
Oh, so I'm concerned that it may be only relevant to community college instructors who teach composition level courses to multilingual students. That's a very small population of teachers in California.
Yeah, but it's not actually, thank you for RG for your input there. Okay, it's not a small population within CATESOL, A, right? B, it is the burning issue for community colleges. I mean, okay, maybe there are a few others like where are all our students, but that's kind of a pandemic related thing that's kind of changing a bit. No, we've published things about 705. We would like to publish more about 705. It's a huge, huge issue. If you look back the last couple of journals, we had one, just somebody who was writing about his co-requisite course, right? And he talked about, what was Guillermo, I think is the author, Coles, I think is his last name. And he wrote something, a really interesting thing where he looked at the pedagogy of his class. And because he was trying to make the argument that everyone is saying that 705 is bad. But if you do your co-requisite class well, then you can get far. Now there's still going to be a debate about that, of course, because he has his population, other people have other populations, but I think that's definitely, look, you're never going to write a piece that every piece of our readership is going to be interested in. You know, the minute you pick an educational context, right? A lot of the K-12 stuff is not as relevant to me, but as a good higher ed teacher, I do read things about what's going on in K-12 and in community colleges, because all those students end up in my class or can end up in my class. So no, I think that that's perfectly okay. But when we say the readership, we're not saying that you have to make sure that everybody within our readership is going to be 100%, is going to resonate 100% with their work. What I mean is that, you know, we're writing for community college instructors. We're not writing for the bean counters who are deciding whether 705 is working or not, right? Or we're not writing to people who are doing large scale research on blah, 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 or a research study on some minutia that might be really important to inform other researchers, but not so much to inform our teachers. Right? That's kind of sometimes a problem with some research too, is they forget about how, you know, eventually it might end up in the classroom. Right.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have another question in the chat from Janice. So is there a representation of educational context in the journal?
You know, that's something that we've struggled with. We would like there to be more inclusivity, but we can only publish what is sent to us, right? It's sort of like when people complain about conferences and there's not enough K-12 or whatever. Well, we can only accept the proposals of people, you know, that we receive. And if we don't receive enough K-12, so we would like to outreach though. It is our responsibility to do more outreach to make sure that there's more inclusivity. And so one of the things that we've been talking about, which is why I mentioned the graduate student corner, we also would like to get the level chairs from CATESOL involved in helping us reach out to the different educational contexts, and maybe also the IGs, the interest groups, in order to increase the diversity of, you know, of course, we get more from higher ed contexts and community college contexts than we do from other contexts. Them's the breaks, right? There are all sorts of reasons in terms of merit, and right, there's little incentive for some contexts, but I think those are the very contexts where people are doing amazing things in the classroom, right? And amazing things at the curricular level, and amazing workarounds despite all the constraints that they may be facing. And those are the groups that we want to hear from. And that's why, as a mentoring journal, we really encourage submissions from that maybe take quote unquote non-standard forms, right? Because we're not in it we're in it to have a quality piece that's well researched and has a researcher or theoretical rationale, but we're not in it to see, you know, who's the bigger name, or, you know, right? It's not about that. It's about a forum for sharing, and it's about a forum for giving people who might not always have a chance to submit something to submit.
Okay. And we have a question from Tamara, and she asked, you mentioned that there are other mentoring journals that will help submissions along. Can you post, send, or list a few?
Yeah, you know, most of the mentoring journals that I know of are in fact the, you know, that's a good thing. And maybe I'll try to put together a list for everyone, and I can try to send it out. The ones that I know of are the other affiliate journals. MEX TESOL has a really impressive journal. Co-TESOL, Korea TESOL. Some of the other state affiliates have really good journals. And those are the ones that I'm most familiar with. The other thing that you can think about is there are, I see more and more some additional sections within more traditional journals. So even the Journal of Second Language Writing, the pieces that I tend to review are in this kind of short communications section. And that allows for shorter arguments about issues. So I just looked at one that looked at how you bring in big ideas, the term big ideas into the ESL classroom, right? If you've got, I see there's a comment here about, there are two here. I'll do the flashcard one first. Flashcards and everyday objects to teach prepositions. Yeah, if, that's something that I could see you getting a couple of publications out of, actually. I could see one that you did almost immediately and sent it off to the blog or the newsletter, but then you could write a longer piece with more of your theoretical background and more of the conclusions with the lit review and all of that that looks like a great reflective teaching piece. I don't know if that project with the flashcards was designed as an action research study, but even if you just have you noticed that there was an issue in the classroom, you decided to figure out a way to address it better. And this is what you came up with. And there's something about the kinestheticness of that, the concreteness, etc. that, all of those things are interesting, right? Computer assisted language learning. Yes. Hello. Anything really right now about computer assisted language learning. Teletandem learning is so cool, right? And so, yes, all of those, that would be a really interesting topic for the journal. Definitely. And that's okay. Yeah, that's what I said, not a formal study. That's RG, that's okay, right? As long as you provide enough of a theoretical background, right? Okay. And I see Sedique is telling me.
Yeah, I'm asking you a question that my students ask me.
Yes.
And so I want them to hear it from you so they don't blame me.
Okay.
And the question is that they write these dissertations, they spend a lot of time and effort on it, and they want to publish it.
Yes.
And you did talk a little bit about the dissertation. Could you elaborate on this? From the 5 chapters, which one they have to read very, very carefully, and then how much should be the expected length of the articles that they will get out of the dissertation to be considered?
25 double-spaced pages is kind of what we tell people, right? And we also tell people that a lot of that dissertation is going to be about your method, your design, right?
Good.
And that's just how it is, right? That's because you've got to show what you know, and you've got to show that you've got that theoretical background, and you talk through it, and you give pages upon pages of, this framework and that framework that you used. And while we want the studies to have that framework, they are not going to emphasize that we need to know that there was, and if there's some really important information, put it in an appendix. But I see people who will turn in things that are 50 pages long that have like page excerpts from X, Y, and from action research right up, and I'm like, no, right? Different audience, right? That's really important for your graduate studies. We're training, instructors are training you in these different approaches to research, right? But when you write it up for the journal, unless you are questioning that method, if you're really just talking about the study that you did, I don't really want to hear page upon page of your method. You tell me what it was, you put in a citation, right? Now, for another type of journal, it may be different. For something like CATESOL Quarterly or Journal of Second Language Writing, or they may be looking for more of your method, but they're still not looking for as much as you put in your dissertation, right? No matter who you're writing for, right? They're just not. And so, Sedique, if you tell them that, you can tell them that it's 25 pages.
That's all. Okay.
What do you think?
Thank you very much. Yeah,
Is that what you tell them, or do
I'll play this tape that I'll just save it there, play it over and over.
Okay. Yeah. And it really is, they need to rethink the piece, right? They're not, it's a completely different audience, and you have a different purpose with the writing. And so if they're writing teachers, you can just tell them, sometimes the writing teachers are the ones I have the hardest time getting this through to, but it's like, it's all about your audience and your purpose. It's your rhetorical situation is completely different. So,
and the three things that you mentioned, findings, discussions, and implications.
Yeah, especially for
that they need to pay attention to.
Especially
Right.
yeah. And
Thanks.
Yilu,
Thank you.
I'm totally excited about your study. Yes, definitely.
And I also have a question for you, Margie. There's some other questions that I've been getting from my students as well. And especially with the state conference coming up, and some of my students and myself as well, and we have been, putting together some proposals and we submitted them, and some of us will be presenting at the conference. And is it okay if we elaborate on those ideas and submit them for review for the journals as well? Or is this something that think it's, the ideas has been presented, we don't want to hear it?
No, because as Sedique mentioned, our readership, we're an open access journal. Our readership is much greater than the people who will be in the audience at the conference, right? No. In fact, I have a handout that I bring to conferences that says, want to publish your CATESOL talk? I mean, that's the name of the handout, right? And it's all about submitting your piece to the journal. So yes, but again, and this is something that I don't think enough graduate programs tell their students about when they're presenting at conferences, is that the biggest mistake that graduate students make when presenting at conferences is they spend too long talking about their method. It's the same problem, right? People don't come to the conference presentation for that. They come for the findings and implications. Now, you don't want to ignore, you need to show that you have a good design, but yeah, if you've got 20 minutes to present, I know this, I see this at AAAL, at the American Association of Applied Linguists. It's like you have 15 minutes to present and 10 to 12 minutes, and they're like, I just finished my method. So really be careful about that. But yes, by all means, they should. And if it's something more like a poster and they're a little bit afraid about writing it up for the journal, then they should also consider the blog or the newsletter. Right? Depending on what they're planning to do, those are perfectly wonderful places to publish.
So for the blog and newsletter, do interested people also submit their ideas to the same email, or?
No, I'll look that up for you.
Okay.
I'll get those for you, and I'll put them in the chat right now. I think there's the CATESOL blog here's the information. And I think there's an email on the blog that says where to send stuff. And then the newsletter, let me go ahead and bring that up. I used to have a slide with that, but I cut it. I shouldn't have. So here's the CATESOL newsletter, and let me see if it has who you should contact. No. Yes. Okay. Here's the newsletter, and there you go. So both of those would be good, and I'll put that back in a slide.
Thank you. And we have a question from Tamara.
Oh yes. Let me see. A couple of high school teachers exploring the effectiveness of restorative measures. I don't know which I'd be more interested in. That might be something that's good. There's a lot there for me to unpack. So I'm not sure I can answer that question really quickly, but I'm interested in both of those. They're both really good, and maybe even the relationship between them, if there is one. But I would ask you to send me a little bit of what you found, and then we could talk about whether there's space for both, whether it's two different articles, whether it's one article. Yeah, I wish I could answer that more specifically, but I'd need a little bit more information. And then here, doing research, ESPN nursing, yes, huge issue. right? Especially because those nurses have to take that exam, and there's such a love-hate relationship with international students in nursing, because they bring in money, but they also don't often pass that exam on the first round, right? Language and cultural experience, yes. I think, yes, we do support ESP, definitely, even though we know that that's a smaller audience. It's more just making sure that you're talking to people who might not have a, that you're talking to people who may or may not have a lot of advanced training in ESP. That's all, in the way that you write it. But let's see what was in the process. I would also share just how to use it. Oof. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and Tamara, why don't we we'll email more about your particular project. Just go ahead and send a note to the journal. I would give you my personal email. It's not that I don't want you to have it, it's that I get so much email there that it's just smarter for you to send it to the CATESOL Journal one, right? Yes, so let's see, I know the use of L1 in the classroom has been discussed. Yeah. I think that the use of L1 in the classroom is definitely of interest. Both what you've done, maybe some sort of study in there could be good, maybe just how to do it. Either one of those, I think, Gina, would be a good paper. And I think that, your takeaway may be a little bit different from one versus the other, but they both sound interesting. And again, this is something that you might want to email us about to see kind of where you're going with each of those, right? And you could also think about that second one would be really good for a blog, just a quick blog or newsletter article. And then if you wanted to wait and do more of a study, you could do that in the journal.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, well, looking at the time, we're out of time, unfortunately. So if you have any further questions, you would be using emails to contact any of the editors there. Dr. Popal, do you have anything?
I would just like to thank Professor Wald again for her very interactive and extremely informative and practical presentation. And if you want to hear more presentations like this, come to the CATESOL conference in Pasadena. It's going to be in 2 weeks. And those of you who could make it, I think you'll find the conference very, very informative. Again, thank you for your active participation. Thank you for being here today. And thank you, Professor Wald, for your, sharing your experiences, sharing your knowledge. As we say in our field, that sharing is caring. Thank you for caring. Yeah.
Thank you. And I know there were a lot of people who were kind of quiet, just listening, and I completely understand that. But I do want to emphasize that if you haven't published before, please, by all means, look to us. Be willing, though, to take the feedback and run with it. But as I said, we'll stick with it as long as you stick with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Mann, for